This recipe is sponsored by Squarespace. So my mom makes these awesome caramel brownies, and for years after I left home, she would bake them whenever I came back around. And she remembered that I like them refrigerated, so they're extra chewy, like pull the fillings out of your teeth levels of chewy. To make them chewy, you got to get yourself 1 pound, 454 grams of soft caramel candies.
And unwrap every single one of them. This will take a while.
It's a good job for small hands, which is why my niece is helping out. Good thing, too, it used to be my job. I can't emphasize enough, you gotta do this with soft, chewy caramels. I don't even want to know what hard caramels would do in this recipe. Maybe explode?
We're going to take a package of German chocolate cake mix.
Yes, cake mix. One of these standard boxes that's just under a pound, 432 grams. I'm sure any box cake would be fine as long as it's chocolate.
Pour it in here.
And don't worry, it's gonna make brownies, not cake. Brownies are chocolate cake, but with proportionally more fat and less water, so they're too heavy to rise.
I'll give this to my lovely assistant Igor to get rid of.
The fat will be 3/4 of a stick of softened butter, 85 grams. And what little water we'll be using comes from 1/3 of a cup of evaporated milk. Save that can, we'll use more later. 1/3 of a cup is like 80 mils. This is the same thing as sweetened condensed milk, but with no added sugar. Make sure you use evaporated and not sweetened condensed, otherwise it'll be way too sweet.
And then we are going to stir all this together.
And you could totally do this without an electric mixer, but it'll be a bit of effort. To keep this from being cake, we have to majorly restrict the moisture content. There aren't even any eggs in there, so when it finally starts to come together, it's going to be extremely thick.
It looks like clay, and that's probably about right. Ugh.
And that's it for the mixing.
Yeah.
Everything else is going to get layered in.
We should have preheated the oven, but we didn't, so we'll do it now.
I was going to say something, but I figured you had a
No,
purpose.
I didn't have a plan. No.
Oven at 350 Fahrenheit, 180 C. Another 1/3 of a cup, 80 mils of evaporated milk goes into those caramels in a heat-safe bowl.
This goes in the microwave.
For like a minute and then check on it. You want to get it just hot enough that it'll melt into a thick caramel sauce. And you won't know if you're there until you start stirring and spreading the heat around. You could do this in a pot over low heat on the stove, that'd be fine, but just barely melt it either way. If it gets too hot, it could kind of seize up or even burn. You'll also want to get a cup of chopped nuts ready, maybe 150 grams. Those are pecans, but you could use anything. Back to the chocolatey dough.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to take half of this mixture, blink, break it up with your fingers, spread it over the pan.
Just in little dollops all over this 9 by 13 inch cake pan. It could be any size in that neighborhood. And then you actually pre-bake those bits for like 5 minutes until they look like little cookies. I know that's weird, but go with it.
So we're going to sprinkle 6 ounces of chocolate chips on top.
That's a cup, 170 grams. Darker chocolate would probably work better here. Everything else around them is super sweet. Sprinkle on that cup of chopped nuts.
Making sure you get the edges and the corners. And then we're going to pour the caramel on top of that.
Lovely stuff. But if you over-bake it, it goes past chewy and becomes straight concrete. That's why we had to pre-bake the bottom layer of the cake mixture. You got to give that a head start so that it will be done by the time the caramel is done.
Now I take the remaining dough and distribute that over the top. Don't forget to put a blob in each corner.
Yeah, the cake mix is so thick that it's going to barely spread in the oven, so you got to get it into the corners yourself. But it's good that it won't spread. That means that after it bakes, you'll have some surface that's cake and some surface that's caramel. Heterogeneity.
So here we go. 18 minutes.
18 minutes in my mom's oven, at least. Every oven is different. Just pull it out when it still looks a little underdone, like that. It should be very soft when hot. As it cools, that caramel is going to firm up a ton, so you got to account for that. Here it is cooled down on the counter the same night we baked. It still has a bit of a gooey vibe, if you're into that. Personally, I am not. I like it the next day, refrigerated. Now it's so chewy that it occupies a liminal space between cake and candy. You know, I talk a lot about my Italian-American heritage on this channel, but this dessert speaks to my waspy heritage from my mom.
This is what I think of as an Ohio recipe. Having grown up in Ohio, it's quick, it's easy, it's tasty, and it contains some kind of embarrassing shortcuts.
Personally, I don't think any shortcuts are embarrassing if they get you where you're trying to go. I mean, you could call Squarespace a shortcut, but what's embarrassing about having somebody else do the hardest parts of building and running your website? I think that's totally fine. You're not in the website building business. You're in the business of whatever business you're in. And Squarespace has everything you need to sell anything. Your products, your content, or your time. If you're a stylist or a lawyer or a therapist or a music teacher or anything like that, you got to get a Squarespace site.
Sellers set their availability, services, and prices, and appointments are published and payments collected via their Squarespace website, social media, text, or email.
Of course, Squarespace also makes it super easy to throw together a simple personal portfolio site or something like that. Throw a picture into a template and you're halfway there. Do that for free, but when you're ready to pay to publish your site, save 10% with my code, Ragusia. That's in the description along with a link. Thank you, Squarespace. And thanks, Mom. I mean, these brownies are not the biggest thing I owe you, but they're close.